Hello, everyone, and welcome to Global Conversations, a soul professional series where curiosity leads, consciousness expands, and science meets soul. I'm Camille Miller, joined by my co-host, Adam Guzmán Poole and Adam Dickinson. Together, we explore the questions humanity is finally ready to ask, bridging worlds, perspectives, and ways of knowing. We're not here to provide answers. We're here to open portals to bigger conversations. So let's begin today's conversation. We are meeting today with Dr. Melissa Corley Carter, who is an actual rocket scientist, 7-continent marathoner, astronaut reject, which we'll talk more about, speaker, award-winning author, retired Air Force lieutenant colonel, and certified professional coach. Melissa, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, all of you, for having me.
You're welcome. So I want to start us off because you lived in some of the most structured environments, rocket scientists, military, elite schools, and yet you still describe your life as a daily dance with the universe. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit and explore how those worlds came together inside of you, and then we'll take it from there.
Hey, awesome. Well, that's kind of a big story, so we'll start small and see where it goes. But basically, all of that started with me wanting to be an astronaut starting in fifth grade. And actually, it kind of starts a little earlier, I guess, because I learned from post-processing the spiritual side of it. But I will say I sort of began my life journey feeling more on the logic side of things, the more structured side, and I think I found spirituality later, but then realized that there was probably the spirituality was already there. I think it's in all of us as soon as we're born, and it gets sometimes Western worlded out of us, right? So anyway, I found myself in fifth grade. An astronaut came and talked to my class in school. And from that day on, I wanted to be an astronaut. I don't actually remember this, but my mom told me that I came home and said I wanted to be an astronaut and never looked back. So I, of course, remember wanting to be an astronaut. I don't actually remember him coming and talking to our class.
Yeah,
But
that makes sense.
fast forward, actually, I met that same astronaut many years later when I was actually in my PhD program. And I got to tell him that he inspired my journey. And of course, that made him feel really old. But in any case, it was really cool to meet him and kind of come full circle again. But
Wow.
so yeah, so I wanted to be an astronaut, but and just literally followed that path for 20 years. I studied all the math and science, even though I was actually more naturally better at English and writing and literature analysis. I could whip out a 10-page paper about Hamlet in one night and get an A+ on it. And I did just as well in my math and science classes, but I had to work a lot harder at them. So, so again, following all the math and science, doing engineering, I got engineering degrees, and all along the way, I had bad eyesight. So I knew that I didn't qualify, but I trusted that someday they would be allowing laser surgery or other kinds of, surgical correction. And so I just kind of kept going on my merry way and joined the Air Force, got my PhD, and then they finally did start allowing corrective eye surgery, and I got LASIK and had 20/20 vision after that. And then I was finally had all of my ducks in a row and was ready to apply in 2012. And I applied to the astronaut class of 2012. And they came back and said that my eyesight before LASIK was so bad that I was disqualified anyway. So, yeah. So
So
that was sort of my dark night of the soul. And I had literally spent 20 years following this path, and I didn't have a backup plan. I had always assumed that I would make it. And I know that's sort of silly because there's so few people make it and so many people apply, but I was very confident that if they just, saw my full application, obviously they would take me. And everyone I had ever met and told I wanted to be an astronaut said, "Oh, I could totally see you being an astronaut," and this, that, and the other thing. And so, but that kind of stopped me short, and I had no idea what to do after that. And so I was still in the Air Force. I was still on a fast track path. And let me just
yeah,
pause there because that is kind of a lot.
yeah, that actually what I was going to ask. Was this before or after you were in the Air Force,
I was.
right?
Mhm.
Practicing rocket science, I'm assuming.
I was doing, yes, I was doing kind of satellite acquisitions at the time. Yes.
Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. And then you apply to be an astronaut, which is separate training at that point.
Right.
When,
Right. So when you're in the military and you
yeah,
apply, you actually have to apply to your service first, and then the
okay.
service will forward your package. And I passed the Air Force board. So the Air Force sent me to NASA, who looked at my medical record before my application and disqualified me for my medical record. So yeah.
So in that moment, when you get that rejection, what was going through your mind? Like, was your identity shattered? Was it what happens next in my life? Like, take us to that moment.
Yes, I definitely identity shattering. I had identified myself as a future astronaut for so long and really felt like I had literally told every person I'd ever met that I wanted to be an astronaut. And it was sort of surreal. I mean, I definitely cried all night and just, called everybody. I called my parents and I called my friends and I called everybody, and it was just a blubbering mess. And I just didn't know what to do. And I'll say the very first day that I found out, I will say I had actually been having some doubts. So actually, in my PhD program, there were a lot of instructors we had who were astronauts, and so I had actually learned a lot about the astronaut sort of lifestyle, and I had it's not, of course, it's very cool being in space, but kind of amusingly, the more you hear about the daily life, it's sort of like just another government job that happens to be really cool for the 2% of time you're in space. And so there were all the pains and challenges of astronauthood that I had actually learned about, and I was starting to really wonder. I was like, do I actually want to do this? And then when I was in Virginia at the time, when I don't know, for those of you in the area, maybe remember when they actually flew the Discovery, or they were parceling out or they retired the space shuttle and they were parceling the orbiters out to different museums. And I was a volunteer at the Air and Space Museum outside of Dulles in DC. Well, it's in Virginia. And that day they were bringing the Discovery in. So they flew it in, and then they put the Enterprise, which was on display at the museum. They pulled them out and put them nose to nose. So they had two orbiters from the space shuttle nose to nose, which is like you never see that. So I, left work for a little bit of time to go to the museum and just marvel at the site. And there were a whole bunch of astronauts there, and I was looking at them, and I had been having my doubts, and then I was looking at them, and I was like, no, I can totally do this. This is absolutely what I want to do. And I went back to work, and I had the email that said that I was rejected. So, I mean, talk about your world falling apart. So yeah. So
Wow.
it was so crushing. And it said that I was medically rejected, but it didn't say why. So I actually didn't know that it was my eyesight. I was thinking, oh no, maybe I shouldn't have gone to the doctor that one time and had that high blood pressure reading. Or so all night I was actually second guessing all of the medical choices I had made, thinking, what was it? And the next day I found out it was the eyesight. And part of me actually felt relieved. I was like, okay, well, I couldn't actually do anything about that. That was not in my control. So I wasn't kicking myself about it, but it was still just the cliff dropped out from under me, and I had no idea where to go or what to do from there. So it was an identity crushing, and I didn't know what to do next. So I was just completely a castaway at that time.
Wow, there's like so much there. Well, first off, I just want to say you're a whole lot of awesome. Like I love I love how basically like from such a young age you had this path and you committed to it the whole time. And even though there were these challenges, you said, "Oh, it's going to work itself out." Like there's got to be so much confidence in your soul to be able to do that. So I just want to like take a moment to celebrate you. That's so amazing.
Thank
And
you,
I
Adam. I
want to,
really appreciate it.
yeah, no, seriously, like that just says a lot about your spirit. So this like tenaciousness. So, but I want to carry on with Camille's question. So you're there and everything's been taken from you. And I feel like breakdowns are great opportunities for breakthroughs. So I'm curious to know what was it? Like, what was it within you that helped you break through that dark night of the soul?
It's a great question, Adam. And I would say it wasn't one thing, it was a series of things. Because it in that moment, it was sort of, I don't know what to do except get up and go to work as normal the next day. So it actually turned out to be good timing because it was about a week before I was in my Air Force job. I was about to take a new position as an aide de camp for a general. And when you're the general's aide, your life revolves around the general. It does not revolve around you. And that was actually really helpful because I actually got so absorbed in the job and in, being the general's aide and all that kind of thing that I didn't really have time to dwell on myself. So I think that actually created a big pause where I really feel like my soul was processing in the background while I was going about the daily life and still rocking it, I will add. I mean, I didn't look to the world like I was any different really, but so it was more kind of that inner turmoil and, I had to go. I had all my like Star Trek DVDs right in front of my TV in my little in my living room. I had to put them all in the closet because I would literally start crying when I would look at them. So I, this is so sad. But anyway, so that was part of the healing process, But so I was working for the general, doing all of that, and continuing on the external fast track while kind of again spinning internally. And so I think then there were many things that led to, I guess, the healing, but it took years. I mean, it wasn't like I woke up a month later and I was fine. So there was it was first of all working for the general and then actually working for her boss, who was. I worked at the National Reconnaissance Office. She was the deputy director, and then I was the executive officer for the director of the National Reconnaissance Office. And both of them were super high-powered women, really amazing people to work with. But I realized when I was working with them that I didn't want to be them. And I was kind of on the track to become them in the future. And I just I was like, this isn't really the life that I want. It was the life that was expected, the life that, I was qualified for, but it didn't really resonate with me. So loved working with them and for them, but I didn't want to follow that path. So that was one thing. And then my next assignment after that, I was again kind of going about the normal business, starting to really feel like I wasn't necessarily living my purpose. And we actually had some of our internal university people come and teach us 7 Habits of Highly Effective People class. And one of the exercises there was to write your mission statement and do, 5 minutes of uninterrupted writing. And I was writing and writing and writing. And I noticed that at the end of it, nothing that I had written about my mission had anything to do with what I was actually doing with work. So it was all like, want to find the universe in myself and in other people and help people, basically live authentic, aligned lives. And for me, maybe every once in a while, I would sit down and have a "Who are you really?" chat with the people, with the people I worked with. But other than that, I wasn't really doing that in my work. So I started thinking, okay, there must be more out there. And so, and took some more leadership classes like that. And eventually I made the decision to leave active duty Air Force and join the reserve. And I learned about life coaching and decided, well, you need to check out this life coaching thing. And so I ended up in the reserve, actually working for our internal university, teaching those. I got to teach 7 habits to other people and learn all of those things, and be at the front of the room teaching all of that stuff. Meanwhile, getting certified as a coach and going through the coach training. And it was, I would say, one of my partner coaches in my coach training led to another really big healing moment, which is we were going through the astronaut thing and I was crying about it. And she said, if your tears could talk, what would they tell you? And that was a really eye-opening question for me. And what came out of it was, well, there were many things that came out of it, but one of the things that came out of it was that I was afraid of actually being okay with not being an astronaut. Because it had again been so much of my identity and all of that. It was like grieving the dream, not even the dream itself, but having the dream, if that makes sense. So there was that. And so I ended up, and I had always used like gratitude as something to kind of break through breakdowns, as it were. And I ended up writing a gratitude letter to my astronaut dream and went through why I was grateful for who it had made me become and all the things that went along with that, but that that I was not the same thing as my dream, and that I was more than that. And so, and actually, I'll say one of the things that I wrote in my letter and that I'll share is that one of my friends, when the whole thing got crushed and I was, pouring my heart out to one of my friends, he said, the reason people tell you they can see you being an astronaut is because they see something so great and wonderful within you that no dream seems beyond you. And so for me, that was so, I mean, it was so powerful and so touching. And I realized that success wasn't being an astronaut, it was being the person for whom no dream is impossible.
It's amazing. Yeah.
I'm I'm sorry. I need to interject because I know this lady and I'm just like, oh my gosh, Melissa, I have known you for a good amount of time and I'm just like I'm already a fan, but now I'm like a super fan. I mean, I don't even know where to begin, but I mean, everything you're saying resonates with me. Oh my gosh. And so if I may build on that just a moment, what kept you going through this dark night of the soul that you started to tap into these other interests of yours, around like energy leadership and human design? What kept you going and exploring that side of yourself? Because I mean, what you just shared, I think a lot of people can relate to, whether it's, not being an astronaut or missing a dream or whatnot. But what kept you going and being able to be resilient?
Well, I think it was probably in some ways inertia, in that I didn't know how to fail, if that makes sense, and fail. I don't actually believe in failure. I've had some moments in my life where I felt like I was, close to failure, but it's not about that. It was more about I was actually successfully able to focus on the job and learning, continuing to just learn from the people I worked with, learn from life itself. I was doing yoga, and I think that I was one of my friends along the marathon journey introduced me to Bikram yoga, and I think that was a really helpful grounding force for me. Every time, going to a yoga class, they would be saying things like, how we are on the mat is how we are in life, and and giving yourself grace and showing up, and you always it's the same 26 postures every class, but it's always a different class because you show up with a different body and all this kind of thing. So the like mindfulness part was really taking root, and the sort of authentic aligned living and how you show up to life in the face of challenges. We talk about challenging yoga class, and so how do you show up in the world? And so there was that, and then I was reading books. I think one of the some life-changing books, I guess, were Thrive. I think it was called Thrive by Ariana Huffington. Was one of the kind of new way of being books, one of the first ones that I read. My sister actually gave me the book Take Time for Your Life, and we did a little read it together thing. We'd read a chapter and we'd talk about it, and then we'd read the next chapter and talk about it. And this was the first life coaching book I'd read. She was a life coach, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. I could do that. And so that sort of introduced me to the life coaching thing. So it was, and I am super grateful to have a tremendously supportive family and friend network, people at work. I feel like I was very supported. So, I didn't feel, even though I felt like, okay, nobody can understand what I'm really going through, it didn't feel like I was completely alone and adrift, because I had a really powerful network. I had, things I still believed in and trusted. And so I think those things probably kept me going through all of that, and then kept me able to keep seeing opportunities and learning new things. So yeah.
So much, so much. You are also a marathoner, an intercontinental marathoner. Is that correct?
Yes, I did one on every continent. Yes.
And you've written a coffee book table about that. and you have your own card deck.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So now you've really branched into this whole spiritual side, or the you of you. Can you, well, what I want to hear about all of those. So obviously your running is what has kept, I always think that that's a connection to your spiritual side as well. The running, right? It's a disconnect. It's the way some people meditate. Can you tell us about that whole life? Did you always run? Were you running back in military times, and was that your constant?
Well, actually, I would say I started running because of the military. I was not really a runner. I tried out I was on the 7th grade track team. That was the extent of my running career. I was in tryouts. I was the last person to finish the mile. I was not a great runner. I did hurdles, and actually my sort of funny track team story was that in one of our track meets, doing the hurdles, the girl next to me fell over her hurdle and like fell on the track, and I stopped to ask if she was okay. Because I mean, I am not athletically competitive. I could do some, but yeah, I'm like, wait, I mean, I can't just keep going. She fell down, you know? So yeah, so not a super illustrious running career. But anyway, so that was my sort of one early life experience with running. And then of course you run when you're in the military. So it was actually in my first Air Force assignment when one of my friends at work, who's a really good runner, she actually convinced me to go running with her and she would take me on longer and longer runs. So it was, I remember my first 8-mile run with her. We were going up and down hills, and the next day I could barely walk down the stairs. But I was actually, I was telling my mom about all of this running when my family went to Carmel, California for a Labor Day weekend, one weekend when I was, that was around that time. And I was telling her about it, and she said, there's a marathon in Big Sur, and which is of course down the Highway 1 Pacific Coast. And I was like, oh wow. Like, well, I mean, to run in Big Sur, that would be really cool. And my sister had actually just run a marathon in I'm going to get this wrong, I think in Tokyo, somewhere around Tokyo. She was in the Air Force as well, and she was stationed at Yokota Air Base in Tokyo. So anyway, she had just done a marathon, and I was like, oh, it never crossed my mind to run a marathon. But again, having done a little bit more running and thinking, okay, it's September, the race is in April, I could train for a marathon by April. So I did, and showed up at the expo for the marathon, and they had a booth for the Seven Continents Club, which was people who ran marathons on all 7 continents. And I was like, well, I mean, why not do that? I mean, literally, as soon as the idea came in, I was like, well, I can't not do that now. That just sounds so cool. So, there I was off to the races. So that's how the whole thing kind of started. And that was going on at the same time as the whole astronaut thing was going on. So incidentally, finishing the 7 continents and being rejected from the astronaut program happened in the same year. So I was actually about 3 or 6, I think it was maybe 6 weeks after I found out about the rejection, that I went to my marathon in Rapa Nui, which is Easter Island, which is a very mysterious place. So it was very interesting. This happened when I was writing the book. I realized how interestingly the course of my marathons paralleled the course of my life, including the progression from like logic to spirituality. And so anyway, so I had 2 more marathons to do after I found out about the whole astronaut rejection, and I finished them that year. And so it was like one dream completed in, fireworks and yay celebrations, and one kind of crashed and burned. But there were so many parallels, and I think that they really informed each other.
Can you go deeper with some of the parallels, or give us, and then I want to talk about how that ended up into a book.
Yes, absolutely. So as I was post-processing, this is actually as I was writing the book, I was trying to decide what order to do the chapters in, and I was thinking maybe I should. I actually don't remember what all I was considering. I don't know why I would have done them out of linear order, but I had some thought that it might make sense to do them out of linear order. So I ended up doing them in linear order anyway, and then realized, oh, the linear order actually is the arc of going from logic to spirituality. In that, so my first marathon was Big Sur, which makes sense. So I actually ran the Big Sur twice. I ran it when I was in Albuquerque in that first assignment, and then I ran it when I was at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey. So I actually trained on the course. So the first time I did, again, I'm not fast. I will cross the finish line, but I'm not fast. So my first marathon was, took me about 5 hours, maybe 5.5 or 5 hours, 45 minutes. And the second time when I was actually living in Monterey, I did all the right things you're supposed to do when you're training. First of all, I was there, so I got to train on the course. There were a few of us training together, and we would actually go run on Highway 1, which is sort of dangerous when it's not closed down, but we did it. And we did all that training. I was doing Pilates, I was doing all the cross training, and so I trained really, really well, and it ended up being my best time. I cut an hour off my time the next year when I ran it, and so 4:40 was my best marathon time of all of the ones that I've done. So it just felt like the training all worked really well, and it was just my mindset was on board. And there was, even I think it was the first year I did it. There's this place called Hurricane Point. There's a top of a hill where it's like a 2 mile uphill, and you're like, I'm never gonna get there. And there's places where they actually have signs that say, "Look back at where you've been." And the first year I did it, I looked back, and you just see fog. And so because a lot of times the California coast is really foggy, right? So there was just fog. You couldn't see where you had been, which strikes me right now as an interesting parallel. But anyway, the next year I did it when I was, all the training was on board. I was going at my best time. You could see the blue sparkling water and the sunshine, and it was just gorgeous. It was like, this is amazing. So I feel like in some ways that was the epitome of logical training, if that makes sense, like doing all the things you're supposed to do and ending up with the result you're supposed to end up with. And which doesn't discount it. I mean, it was amazing, and I'm absolutely thrilled with it. But then, as I went, kind of fast forwarding to the Rapa Nui Marathon at Easter Island, right after the soul crushing Dark Night of the Soul, there was a lot more to that island than just like the head statues. And by the way, they're not just heads, they're bodies too. But there's a place there called Tepito o Tehenua, which is this like big round rock with other little rocks around it. And the touristy thing to do is you actually go and you put your hands on it, and you feel spiritual energy flowing into you. And I'll say at the time I was not super spiritual, but I was like, this is what you're supposed to do, so I'll do that. So I did it. And I don't know that I noticed anything in particular, but looking back on it, thinking, wow, so this is the logical path had just, the door slammed in my face, and I'm immediately presented with this spiritual opportunity to just see what happens next. And so there's a lot of mysterious things about that island, and so just being in the mystery of not knowing what was coming next. So there's the mystery of it. And then also, what we call it Easter Island, if you think about Easter is about a resurrection, right? And like a death and rebirth. And that's kind of where I was in my life at the time. And then the last marathon I did a few months later was in Australia, in Port Douglas. There was a solar eclipse marathon. And so we went to see a solar eclipse, and the starting gun for the marathon was the moment that the sun's rays came back out from behind the moon. And there's some really cool stuff about that I can share. But in general, if you think about a solar eclipse, it's all about alignment, right? The sun and the earth and the moon are all in perfect alignment. And so thinking about that later, I was thinking, wow, I didn't know what alignment necessarily looked like for me at the time, but it was guiding me towards a more aligned path. So, one of the upshots is I am at this point so grateful that the astronaut thing didn't work out, because I wouldn't have found this path. So I am so grateful for how everything turned out to be here. And I know that everything in my life has been always the right experience and guiding me towards who I really am meant to be. And so let me pause there. I do have another thing to say, but I'm just pause.
So much to take from. So where did the barefoot dancing part of you come online?
So that actually, it was funny, that came up. I will say my husband actually first gave me that little moniker before he actually knew me, because I was applying for a leadership program when I was still working at the National Reconnaissance Office, and he was actually one of the facilitators for the program. And I wrote all this stuff about you have to write your hobbies and things like that. And And he read my application. He's like, huh, a barefoot dancing rocket scientist. This will be interesting. Because I had started actually, along the marathon journey, I got into barefoot running. So the sort of natural natural movement and all the things that come out of that. So barefoot running. I also really like social dancing. Like I would go swing and country dancing. When I was in my first assignment, I did lots of swing and country dancing, and so the things that I did created that little name. But since then, it's really turned into who I'm being, because being barefoot is really about being natural, being grounded, being really in connection with the earth and with our own intuition and all of that. Dancing really is about connection and creation and artistry. And so while I don't necessarily go out dancing in the clubs, I am dancing with the universe every day. So we said from the beginning, the daily dance with the universe. The universe is our dance partner, and so all the creative energy that I used to really enjoy from social dancing, I get from every day just being in awe of how the universe works and being able to create in partnership with the universe. And then the rocket sciencing is not just about rocket science itself; it's about exploration and really expanding the boundaries of what's possible for us.
That's so amazing, Melissa. And you've definitely pushed boundaries for sure in your life. It's a beautiful testament. As I was hearing your story, just from the early age, it seems like you were always connected to this to your soul nature. You know, in a lot of different traditions, they talk about us as the soul and how the soul is indestructible. And even as you were talking about failure, like, I don't believe in failure. And that's like the soul talking, it's just like, no, I will crush everything in my way. And it seems like you've done that all throughout your life. Like you've always been connected to your soul nature. So I'm curious. So you've been there, you were there, and you were crushing every obstacle in your way in all the all the marathons. And I'd love to go deeper into, okay, you weren't in alignment, then you were, right? You were in alignment. There's the eclipse. And tell us about your path then. So there was that logical. And then you were in this like spiritual domain. You were more connected to your authentic self. So what did the journey look like from there as you started like connecting to your more spiritual nature?
Great question. I think like I love that you said, your soul is indestructible and it's always there. And that's actually one of the things I learned through this journey. And I would say, so as I post-process the astronaut rejection, one of the things I've learned is to ask, what's the goal behind the goal? What do you really want when you set goals? And when I really reflected on the astronaut goal, I realized that, my little fifth grade self, when the astronaut came and talked to my class, what I really wanted in being an astronaut was that I had actually always known I had this intuitive knowing of my spiritual connection with the universe. And so that had always been there, even though I didn't know that. I wanted to inspire people to greatness the way astronauts had always inspired me. And I was inspired by the vision of a unified and harmonious world. Astronauts always talk about they go up in space, they look down, and you can't see any borders. And so you see the world as a globe. And so that part, I realized that my fifth grade self who saw the astronaut come talk took all of that I didn't have words for at the time and said, oh, be an astronaut. So I think that, to answer your question, coming full circle, that journey looked like realizing that I get to do all of those things every day through the work that I do in coaching, through just showing up as, an aligned being. And so that's why I don't regret. And I'm so grateful for the astronaut rejection, because it put me into this aligned path of what did you really want from that? There's a million ways you can satisfy that, not just be an astronaut. So that journey looked like just being inspired by the things I was learning in the coaching journey, learning about the topic of energy leadership that I coach on, and just following all the little threads of who are you really. I got to human design because I was, I signed up for some. Well, there's a long story there, but anyway, it's another get to know who you are sort of modality, and I followed all the little threads of what was calling me to really find out what alignment meant to me and what living my purpose meant to me. And so just kind of following from one to the next, little stepping stones, and seeing them all intertwine and really discover what alignment meant. And so I will say, while I think everything that we do in our lives is in alignment, it just maybe it's so was I meant to be an astronaut? No. But that doesn't mean that my wanting to be an astronaut was wrong or somehow the wrong path, because it put me on the path that brought me to who I am today, and doing the unique way of coaching that I do. I wouldn't be doing if I didn't have if I hadn't followed that path. So yeah, so alignment, I think it's like you're on the right path until you're not, and then there's even more alignment that you get as you learn what alignment actually means and what it looks like, and you really start literally living the dream every day. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, I need to jump in because I'm like super excited to build on that, if I might. Melissa, when we first met, I was like, oh my gosh, you're fun. I love your vibe. And I mean, same with like Camille, Adam, like, you're definitely my people. So I mean, so many questions come to mind, but I would love to dive into, if you're able to share a little bit like how we met, and then also, if you're open to it, I would love to, if you could share with our audience a card draw, because I know I've mentioned this to you before. I've had a couple ups and downs recently, and I know I subscribed to your newsletter and I was reading one of your messages, which I told you, and I just find the resonance that you provide very soothing, calming, aligning, and I'm just like, oh my God, yes, I need to listen to Melissa right now. So first, if you are open to it, would love to for you to share your experiences on how we met, and then if you're could share a card draw with us.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So my memory of how we met. When I was working at NRO and working in our internal university, Adam was working for the FBI, and we sometimes for our classes would, if they had space, we would send them out to the larger intelligence community. And so Adam showed up in one of our Crucial Conversations classes, which I had been teaching for a while. And Crucial Conversations, can't say enough good things about it. It's an amazing book. It's an amazing class. And so, but I was actually transitioning. I actually went from teaching our leadership classes to actually doing leadership and professional development for the actual reserve team at the NRO, which is what I was a part of. So at the time, we had two new instructors in the class, and I was in the back of the room, kind of the lifeline, and if there's an odd number and anybody needs a partner, I'll be their partner kind of thing. And everybody was going around doing introductions. And Adam, I actually don't remember what it was that you said in your introduction, but it was something along the lines of, you were sort of working on this spiritual path and whatever. And I was like, huh. I was like, oh, so another person in the Intel community who's into spiritual woo-woo like me. And so I was like, that's really interesting. And I was like, at the end of each module in the Crucial Conversations class, you have a learning partner that you meet with to talk about, what you learned and what you're going to put into practice. And I was like, okay, if we have an odd number, I want to be his learning partner. And literally that's what happened. So, I mean, talk about manifestation, right? So we had an odd number, and Adam ended up without a partner, so I get to be his partner. And and so, we're off to the races, ending up talking about human design, and I'm sure we talked about some Crucial Conversations in there somewhere. But yeah, it just sort of was resonance right away, and it was really cool. So because I didn't really meet a whole lot of people with that vibe necessarily in the intelligence community either. So it was really fun.
Yeah, me either.
There's more than you think. That's actually one of the things that I learned is there are yeah, more than you think. But it's fun to find someone who resonates.
Yes, I
So
would agree with that. But yeah,
yeah.
if you could also just share us a card draw, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so this is my card deck here. It's called Running Your World, which is a little bit of a fun take on. So my book is called Running the World, and this is Running Your World. And so, so it has there's a each card has a photo from one of the continents on the front, and then a message on the back. So what I'm going to do is. If everyone wants to just kind of get a little bit grounded, maybe close your eyes if that feels good, or just kind of breathe. And whoever's listening, I invite you to just let yourself arrive in this moment, letting go of anything that came before, letting go of anything that will come after. Just letting yourself be right here, right now. And as you just become present in the moment, I'm going to bring the cards to my heart and ask what message most wants you to hear it in this moment. Put that intention out there. I'm going to shuffle the cards. All right. All right. So our card is curiosity. All right. So this card is from the Aberdare National Park in Kenya, in Africa. So this was, and there's just a little kind of dirt trail here. So the message of the card is, what's around the bend? Do you trust yourself to venture forth and discover a more expansive world? What sparks your curiosity? What inspires you to delve deeper? What do you want to create more of in your life and in the world? Curiosity can lead you to places and states of being you may never have thought possible. But the unknown can also spark fear. Fear of the unknown is normal, but not required. What if you transformed fear into powerful confidence? Embrace the mystery. Trust that you can handle whatever is around the bend. Shift your wondering from what if I don't know enough or have enough to what if I do? If you trusted that you already have all the resources you need to create your most aligned, world-changing life, where would your curiosity take you next?
I'm sorry, I have to jump in. I have to. I'm sorry. Like, I just need to preach. Your cards are such a high energetic vibration. I don't know what it is, but your messages just resonate with me so hard. Like, it is just, it hits home so well. Like, every time I'm having a hard problem, I'm like, I need to draw a Melissa card. But I love that, and yeah, I just want to bounce that off of my co-host. I just had to put in that plug because every time I listen to your messages, it just really resonates.
Thank you, Adam.
I want to say it was like the perfect card for this particular podcast and the audience, because curiosity expands is part of our subtitle. So, and that's what we're asking everyone to do here. Just open up the portals of curiosity.
And I love it. That's how they work. It's how I created them. The magic just happens.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you for that.
That's amazing, Melissa. And I'm curious. I'm curious.
Perfect.
Good things happen from curiosity. So I'm curious in when you're looking as you were speaking, I just started thinking about right now the times that we're facing are pretty crazy times, and I think a lot of people are wondering, okay, what's going on in the world? And this shows a lot about, we're talking about soul professionals. Like these are people who are connected to something bigger than themselves, and it's really a movement about changing and shifting paradigms. And I'm curious, what do you feel is the role of a soul professional in today's changing, chaotic world?
Beautiful. I think that the role is holding space first of all, I think the role is to do our own spiritual healing work so that we can show up and hold space for the people who are struggling and have a hard time maybe seeing the higher vibration. So I think modeling the way really is so important, that we show an alternative of what's possible. Because there's plenty of outlets that will tell you, that the world is ending and going, everywhere in a handbasket, and it doesn't actually. I actually don't believe that. I think there's so much, uh, you know, fear mongering, I'll call it. That there's so many reasons that the people that I don't know. Let's say that people are trying to be kept in fear, and that's and so I think that people who can show up and hold space for that, first of all, because it's totally natural. Like if that's all you're inundated with, of course you're going to be in fear. But if you see someone who is maybe seeing the world in a different way and in a different vibration, you see that it's possible and that you actually don't have to follow the popular narrative. That there is a different narrative that you can embrace. And so I think that that as soul professionals, it is really about, first of all, doing our own work to work on our own fears. I mean, I'm not immune to fear. So, working through our traumas and our fears and so that we can hold that higher vibration and bring more and more people into that vibration to collectively raise the vibration of the planet.
Amen. Let's do it.
Absolutely.
Melissa, is there anything we did not ask you or that you want to talk about and tell our listeners? And then, of course, we want them to know how to get in touch with you.
I think the one thing I would say is that you're already, like, don't stress about whether you're doing the right thing or on the right path. So my mission in life is to shine my light and inspire you to shine yours. And it is really about you trusting that you're trusting that your
Just
light is
watching
already
Adam
shining.
It was
So it's not your light is not about what you do. It is about it's being you and showing up as yourself. And so I think that if you're stressed or putting pressure on yourself, just take a big deep breath and relax. You're already on the path. You're already doing it right. So don't stress and just show up and shine your light.
So inspirational. Your entire story has been so inspirational.
Thanks for shining your light, Melissa. Yeah, bless you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Yes.
Bless all of you. Thank you all for shining your light. You wouldn't be here if you weren't shining your light either. So thank you.
Melissa, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
It would be going to my website, epiclifeactually.com, which is your epic life actually is rocket science. That's a whole nother story. But in any case, epiclifeactually.com. There's a contact form there, or I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn at Melissa Corley Carter. Instagram is my favorite of the social media platforms. So
beautiful. Adam G, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Oh, I just want to say thanks a lot, Melissa. It's been a joy having you on the show. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And I look forward to connecting with you. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate all of you.
Yes, I would just want to add, I'm a big fan, Melissa. I mean, rock star, rocket scientist, just love your story. I'm a big fan. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right. And for all of our listeners, we want to thank you for listening to this episode of Global Conversations, which is part of the Soul Professional Global Conversation series. If today's dialogue sparked something for you, we invite you to continue the conversation by subscribing. Please subscribe, check subscribe, sharing this episode, or connecting with the Soul, SOUL professional community at soulprofessional.com. This series is an open invitation to explore, question, and expand together. Until next time, stay curious, stay conscious, and stay connected. Oh my God, that was so amazing, wasn't it?
Yes, I agree. I am a big fan of Melissa, and I mean, even the card draw was like, well, that's timely and kind of eerie, on point.
So inspiring for our listeners that are listening. Melissa's jumped off. We are just recapping, and I'd like to say that's our first guest. Episode 4 for us. This was our first guest. So if you're still listening, if this is where you joined us, please go back and listen to episodes 1, 2, and 3, where we talk about me and Adam Dickinson and Adam Guzmán Poole separately, just about how we came to be, how this series came. So it'll really kind of cue it up for you. But Melissa was amazing. So how about that? Our first guest is a rocket scientist.
Rock
And
star
thank
rocket
you to Adam
scientist.
D for getting her on. So pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm curious. Adam D. So you met her in the intelligence agency. You were okay.
Yeah, we met at a training course within the National Reconnaissance Office, and she was an instructor there, and I immediately just resonated with her energy, her perspective. It was very, you could use the word high vibration, very positive, and it was noticeable within the other students, which were just generally talking about other topics. But I mean, she stuck out as someone that was very bright and magnetic, for sure.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and I think her story is a real reminder, and I think she left it at that, like you're a light too, no matter where you are, whether you're in the intelligence agency, whether you're, in as a janitor, whatever you are, wherever you are, you can be that light and you can shine and you can be that indestructible soul nature. And I think that there's a lot that we can kind of learn from there in her story of just not taking no for an answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That resonates, Adam, especially the fact that a lot of the, just generally speaking, the topics that we were touching on more or less during the training course were a lot more negative in nature. And the point that you're making really hits home with me because I'm coming from the U.S. federal government, which was more generally focused on fear-based challenges and obstacles. And what you described, it was also a reason I immediately was like drawn to her energy.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's not like obvious, I was like, oh my God, you're amazing. And how do I like, what's your name? And how do I get to know you?
I'm curious with your relationship, like when you met,
Yeah.
because you are hiding that soulful side as well, right? And
Mm.
your gifts of the Akashic records and all that you like, where does that come out in your conversation? Like, where do you start when you're meeting someone who's like, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of soul professionals kind of keep that part quiet.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think for me, she just exuded safety, like your
Mm,
energy as well, Camille, exudes safety. And sh like she was also very much optimistic is probably the best word I can provide
okay.
for our audience, where I felt like if I were to share with her that I practiced the Akashic records, I wouldn't feel judged or I wouldn't feel like I was an outsider, because a lot of times the culture that I came from was, how do I want to describe it? You you had to behave a certain way, and if you didn't, or if you thought differently, it was definitely noticed. And
Yeah.
so if you didn't want to be noticed, you sort of dimmed your light, if you will. But when, and this is also part of behind the scenes with Melissa, and what she stands for is taking that giant leap forward in your life and in your journey to be more aligned. When I got to know her even more, uh, she just gave me essentially a permission slip to be who I needed to be. And she made it easy. And she was such an inspiration that I was like, oh, okay. Well, if she sees this about me and if she views life this way, then that was sort of like a role model that I could
Mm.
build upon. Yeah.
Can I jump on this, Camille? Sorry, there's something I just feel I really want to call on it. It's just I think there's something really there because Melissa said herself, you said there's not, being in the intelligence agency, there's not many of us. And she said, there's a lot more than we think. There's a lot more. And I think there's a lot of times where people were living in the status quo, but they're dimming their light
Yes.
because they're just dimming their light. And there's a lot of soul professionals out there that are dimming their light. They're not fully being authentic. I just looked at someone who I know and I looked at their branding and I know that they are such a soulful person. They're so connected to source. They're so connected to the spirit. And their branding of their business doesn't have anything to do with it. It's all just like leadership. And it's just like, it's so blah, right? But I know there's so much more and they're dimming who they actually are. But I
Yeah.
think and what happens, their business isn't actually growing as much as it could. And I think the gift is that when we show who we authentically are, we actually and we shine our light, we can be what like Melissa is just shining so bright, right? We see that and we're like, wow. So it's a real testament. She shined her light on you, Adam. Adam, you continue to shine it on other federal workers, and it just keeps going. So there's the gift of really being in alignment with our authentic self and being willing to share and shine that light bright.
Yeah. Love that. The ripple effect, right? And I agree with everything you said because one of the things I teach is just like you show up. When you show up authentically, you naturally are magnetic because you're not hiding. If you're hiding, then you're probably not finding the clients and the right people because you're hiding. Right? So when you show up, they show up because they feel your energy. I love this. Well, thank you guys so much for a fantastic first interview. And for our listeners, we have an incredible lineup. So if you're joining us this one, go back. And if you're in the middle, go forward because, oh my gosh, these episodes that we're about to release are just incredible.
Yes.
Let's
Thanks,
do it.
Camille.
All right. We'll see everyone on episode 5. Bye.
Bye.